Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining this 21st webinar of the Energy Efficiency Academy. We will wait 1 or 2 minutes that participants connect, and in the meantime you should see a first quick question so that we know how familiar you are with the webinar series. Good morning again, and thanks again for joining this 21st webinar of the Energy Efficiency Academy. Today we will discuss about energy efficiency trends in industry in the European Union, and we will have the pleasure to have with us two key experts on energy efficiency in industry and more generally on energy efficiency indicators, Zineb Raji and Bruno Lapillon from Enerdata. And you can see here the title of the two main parts of the presentations today. Some quick practical information, housekeeping rules before we start. Your microphones and camera are off so that it does not disturb the recordings. You can ask questions anytime in the Q&A panel. I really encourage you to use this part of your Teams to ask questions, so to do it in the Q&A panel and not in the chat. You can also share information and comments in the chat, but the advantage of sharing your questions in the Q&A panel is that other participants can upvote the questions they find the most relevant. So also, if you don't ask questions, you can also look at the questions from the other participants, and you can upvote the questions you really want to hear about. All the webinars are recorded, and presentation files and recordings are shared afterwards. You can see in the chat the link to the part of the website that you see on the right-hand side of the slide, where you can download the proceedings of the previous webinars and get also the information about the next ones. Speaking about the next ODYSSEE-MURE event in 2026, the next webinar is already set up. That's on Thursday, 26th of February. That will be with a slightly different time as usual. So we will start at 11:30 Central European time, and we will discuss about energy poverty with a focus on the case of Portugal and presentation by ADN experts from the Portuguese Energy Agency, as well from EPA, the Energy Poverty Advisory Hub, and the Save Energy Together project. More generally, I encourage you to stay tuned and register to the ODYSSEE-MURE newsletter to get all the information about the next webinars and the next activities of the project. We will also share this link in the chat briefly. Other interesting events in 2026 that we recommend to you and that are organized by ECEEE, that is one of the partners of ODYSSEE-MURE. In February, early February in Rome, there is the industry conference, the EC-EEE Industry 2026, where ODYSSEE-MURE will take part, especially to present a preview of the 2025 Energy Efficiency Scoreboard with a focus on industry, and there will also be a side event on competitiveness and energy security. And also, if you want to share your own work on energy efficiency, I really recommend you to look at the call for abstract for the summer study. That will be in June, but the call for abstract is closing tomorrow, so there is still time, but hurry up if you want to submit your papers. That's it for the introduction. You can see here the partners of the consortium, and I'm happy to hand it over to Dineb and Bruno for the topic of today. Dineb, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jean-Sébastien, and good morning, everyone, and thank you for being with us today to talk about energy efficiency trends in industry. Does everyone hear me all right? Do you see the screen? Everything is okay.
We don't see your screen yet,
okay.
Or at least not in my side.
Check that. All good now? No, not yet.
No, c'est noir pour l'instant. That's black for the moment.
It should work now.
Okay.
All good.
Yes.
Right?
Now we see it full screen. That's perfect.
Okay, thank you. So good morning, everyone. As I was saying, thank you for participating in this webinar. Just before starting, a very quick reminder about the ODYSSEE-MURE project for those of you who are joining for the first time, and sorry for those who are our partners since a long time. It's going to be a little repetition, but just quickly, the ODYSSEE-MURE project is supported by the LIFE program, the European Commission's LIFE program. The current project is coordinated by Fraunhofer, which also manages the MURE database on energy efficiency measures, and they're supported by Enordata, which manages the ODYSSEE database, and which is represented by Bruno and myself today, and IECP, represented by Jean-Sébastien, who is our host for today's webinar. And the work that's being done within this project is supported and made possible by a network of 40 national partners in 27 EU member states, 9 energy community countries, and Switzerland. So without further ado, I'll move on to the analysis, but quickly, all the analysis and the data that you're going to see today is mostly coming from the ODYSSEE database. So what you can find currently in the database is data and energy efficiency indicators up to 2023. So mostly from Eurostat for the aggregate data, and from national partners for the detailed data up to 2023. And at Enordata, I have supplemented this data by early estimates for 2000 and 2024 that we calculate based on a methodology that you can find in the link on the screen that you're going to be able to access once we share the presentation with you. So all of this data and indicators are available in the web portal that you can access, and that we invite you to go have a look at, and the link is on the screen. So moving on to today's presentation, as introduced by Jean-Sébastien, we're going to be looking at energy efficiency and consumption trends in the industry sector. So first, starting with a look at the share of industry in total final consumption. So at EU level in 2023, 24, we are at around 25% of total energy consumption that is represented by the industry sector, and the share has been rather stable since 2010. we see a few differences between countries, with some of them showing higher shares for the sector, namely Finland or Sweden, for example, that have shares that are above 35%. And in terms of progression, this share has been increasing in a few countries, 9 of them, and these are mainly smaller EU countries, noting some significant increasing shares in Hungary, for example, which increased by 8% throughout the period. If we want to look further at this consumption trend, we have compared the evolution or the progression of the consumption of the sector with the progression of the sector's activity, represented by the value added here, the green curve, and also compared it with the evolution or the progress of average energy prices. So as you can see on the upper chart, the energy consumption has dropped significantly between 2021 and 2023. So no surprise to anyone, this is mainly linked to the surging energy prices, as you can see with the orange curve. So a significant increase at EU level. Looking at 2024, we see a modest recovery for consumption in the last bit of the blue curve, the blue line, but we are still 11% lower than in 2010. So this trend has been quite consistent throughout the EU and EU member states, but in some countries more than others. So, for example, in Poland, which shows the highest consumption reduction throughout the period, we have observed 15% less consumption in the sector, compared with a NEO average of 10% decrease. Looking further at the prices which explain this consumption trend between 2021 and 2023. So we have the box plot on the right hand side of the slide, which shows the dispersion of the variation of energy prices throughout the EU and EU member states. So as you can see, we have different variations of prices between 2021 and 2023, with some countries having prices varied as high as 85% or as low as 23%, but most of the variation is situated between 40 and 70%. At EU level, the variation was 54%. And as you can see on the left-hand side, so the charts that shows the variation compared with 2019 in orange bars, and the annual variation with the year before in the blue bars. If you look at 2022, which has known the highest increase in prices, the orange bar shows that we are 70% higher if we compare the prices with 2019. So that was just to zoom in on the evolution of prices, which explains most of the decrease in consumption that we have observed in that period. Now, a closer look at what drives or what explains this evolution or progress in consumption throughout the branches. It is useful to note that 70% of the sector's consumption is driven by 5 main branches, which are chemicals, non-metallic minerals, paper, food and beverages, and steel. So the leading consuming branch is chemicals, which consumes 20% of the sector's energy. Further, we are going to be looking at energy efficiency trends. And in the ODYSSEE, the way we measure energy efficiency progress is through an index called the ODYSSEE. So we first look at progress within the sector that we measure by branch with indicators of specific consumption. And these indicators are measured in physical units that we select to be as close as possible to energy efficiency. So, for example, it's going to be ton of oil equivalent per ton for energy-intensive products, and mainly branches where production is homogeneous, and they can be expressed in tons. So, like for example, steel, cement, pulp, and paper. For other branches where production is less homogeneous, we measure the specific consumption by TOW per production index. Then after this first step, we calculate an energy efficiency index for the sector as a whole that we call the ODYSSEE, and this index is calculated by converting the variations that we've seen in these specific consumption for the branches into a variation index, and then we calculate a total or like an overall global index for the sector by weighting the share of each branch in the industry's consumption. So not all branches indexes are equal. They're weighted by the importance of that branch within the overall sector. And in ODYSSEE, there are 15 branches that are considered in the calculation of the ODYSSEE index. And it is important to note also that any structural changes between these 15 branches is actually taken into account, and the methodology allows us to clean the calculation from the impact of such structural changes. Now, looking at what has been happening in the sector throughout the period between 2010 and 2023, in two of the main branches, just to show you like an example of what I've been talking about and what we can do for each of the 15 branches. I'm not going to go into detail for these, but just so you can see that we can actually track progress for a specific consumption here shown on the screen for the steel branch, for the cement branch as well. And this allows us to calculate these specific consumption indicators that are then used to calculate the overall ODYSSEE for the sector. Now, looking at the overall sector at the EU level for the period between 2019 and 2023 mainly, we have noted an acceleration of energy efficiency at EU level between 2019 and 2023, and the rate was 2.4% per year, compared to 1.2% per year during the 2010-2019 period. So what you can see on the screen is a chart showing the overall period, so 2010-2023, and these are the orange bars. And then we have looked closely at two separate periods to explain any variations that might be happening within the period. And as you can see, at EU level and in 7 member states, the rate or the rhythm of energy efficiency gains has accelerated, while it has slowed down in 17 member states. But it is important to know that the member states where this rhythm has accelerated have shown a rather significant acceleration, while the slowdown in the countries where there was a slowdown was rather limited, with also some countries showing a rather stable trend over the whole period, with no difference between 1923 or 1019. And these countries are mostly Denmark, Slovenia, and Germany. So this leads us to look at the overall energy efficiency trend in the EU, in the sector, as we said, expressed or represented through the ODYSSEE the ODEX indicator or the ODEX index. And what we've observed is that the total energy efficiency progress for the EU was at 19% since 2010. So what you can see here on the slide is the total the improvement of energy efficiency for the EU as a whole for the total for the sector represented in black. So it's the blue, the black line in the middle. Then we have also included a focus on some specific branches that are that represent the highest shares of consumption in the sector. So here we have the chemicals, and it's the orange line, the non-metallic minerals branch in blue, food, beverage, and tobacco in green, steel, red, and paper, pulp, and printing products in gray. So as you can see, the progress has been mainly driven by the chemicals branch, which saw a 42% improvement in energy efficiency, followed by the non-metallic minerals branch, which shows a 13% improvement. We also see that there are some lagging sectors or lagging branches, namely steel and paper in gray and red, which have shown mostly no progress in terms of energy efficiency. The food branch as well has been quite stable in terms of energy efficiency progress, but has started to show some progress since 2021 with a 6% improvement. The ODEX indicator then allows us to estimate or to calculate energy savings, or the savings that have been made possible by energy efficiency gains. And looking at the EU for the period between 2000 and 2024, we have observed 100 megatonnes of savings at EU level, which means that if there has been no energy efficiency gains, consumption would have been 100 megatonnes higher, or 30% higher if we look at the sector's consumption. So most of this these savings happened after 2010. So 60% of them happened after 2010. Jean-Sébastien, maybe we would like to take some questions here.
Yes, there are already a few questions to you. So let me come back to, I don't see all of them, that's strange. Some have disappeared. Okay. No, okay, they are there. Maybe we can start with the one from Enrico Clementi, because that's methodological questions that we get often about the ODYSSEE indicators and ODEX. Can you explain why physical dimension is better than the monetary one to proxy energy efficiency? I don't know, Zineb or Bruno, if you want to take this one.
Why is physical?
Why is, let's say, why an indicator based on a physical indicator is better than the one that is based on a monetary indicator to monitor energy efficiency trends?
From the beginning of the ODYSSEE project, we decided to work with physical quantities because the value added is changing because of other factors like profits and the fact that the price effect may not be well corrected, which is not the case with production index of physical quantities. And it's true that the energy required is somehow linked to the quantity of material you have to process.
Thanks, Bruno. I think it's quite clear, and that's also very useful from your slides to see that it's very worth it going beyond energy intensity and to go in more detailed indicators. I think that that's also what you explain about this question. The second question comes from Paolo Bertoldi, and maybe Zineb, you can go back to the slides where you show the evolutions in energy prices. His question is, what is included in energy prices here? Is it electricity, gas, or oil, and does it include taxes?
It's a weighted average of all fuel used in industry.
Yeah, maybe this one, I guess.
It doesn't include value-added tax, but other taxes are included.
All the taxes are included, right?
Except value-added.
Except value-added. Okay,
For
perfect.
industry, it is not really a tax.
Okay, so weighted average from all fuels.
Quantity consumed in the country. So it includes all fuels.
So all fuels based on their weight in the energy balance and including all taxes except VAT. So I hope it answered the question. I think it's quite clear. Then questions from Jan Neil. To which extent does the chemicals improvement energy efficiency, I mean the energy efficiency improvements in chemicals compared to intra-branch structural change?
Yeah. So there is some methodological developments that we're working on to address the product effect or the change in structure within the branches, and we're going to address that later. So it's coming in once we look at the drivers.
Okay, maybe then I take one more and you continue, and we can go back to, because there are many questions, so we can come back to them after the second part of the presentation. So the last question for the moment from Lucie-MURE from ADEME. It's always difficult to disentangle causal effects, but can we link the acceleration in energy efficiency for the 2019-2023 period to the lasting effect of the COVID-19 on industry, overall slowdown on the activity necessarily with a decrease of final energy consumption?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Well, how would we measure the impact of COVID? I mean, with prices we can clearly compare and see a rather similar trend. As prices surge, consumption decreases. But do you mean the impacts on activity of industry?
Yes. Yeah, she said overall slowdown of the activity necessarily with a decrease of the fact that due to COVID-19 you had a decrease in activity, which generates a decrease in final energy consumption.
Here we have the value added, which should be a good proxy to measure the progress in activity. And as you can see, there is a rather link between both. For example, if you look at 2021, activity increases, consumption increases as well. But as you can see, there is like a decoupling between 2021 and 2023. So activity is rather stable while consumption does decrease. And this can only be explained by the surge in prices.
And I guess it makes a nice link with the continuation of the presentation, because that's about disentangle the different drivers. So I hand it over to you for the next part of the presentation.
There, right. So we have selected the 2019-2023 period to look at the drivers behind the variation in energy consumption, because it's a period where there was a rather peculiar, I would say, trend in consumption. So we've performed the composition analysis of energy consumption variation through looking at certain effects that can impact the change in energy consumption. So what you're looking at here is a chart that shows the consumption of industry in 2019, which was at 257 megaton, and the consumption of the sector in 2023, which was 228 megaton, or 29 megaton lower. So what the analysis shows is that this decrease is explained by energy savings in the most part, which contributed to lower the consumption by 24 megato. We have also structural effects within the branches, which contributed to further decrease the consumption with 12.5 megato. So this is mostly a growth of less energy-intensive branches that drives the consumption of the sector down as a whole. And so these two effects alone managed to offset the industrial growth that amounted to 6.5 megato of increase in consumption. And this doesn't, as we said, doesn't look to structural changes inside the branches themselves. The structural effect here depicts the change of the structure in the sector as a whole between the branches. And as I said, we are working currently on some methodological developments to look at the structural changes within the branches, mainly in the branches where this is significant. Maybe Bono, you want to say a few words about this?
Okay, so this will answer to some of the questions raised in the Q&A. And actually, we had the same question as you to try to understand what are the reasons behind this deep acceleration in energy savings. So, of course, among the different factors that are behind this trend, we have to take into account that the very high increase in prices. We show you the average increase in weighted average prices, but in some branch which rely more on gas, the increase was more important, even because of the increase in the price of gas was very, very high. So among the factors, of course, there is a better management of energy use faced to the high price rise, and also emergency measures due to the fact that there were constraints on the gas supply. Of course, there are real investment in energy-saving equipment, driven by prices, driven by the high growth in 2021, which was a rebound year. And there is always a correlation between investment in energy efficiency and the level of activity, because there is more renewal of equipment if there is a high growth. And we come to the question that was raised about the chemical industries. It is true that in some branch, what we have included in the savings, because of the availability of data, there are indeed some structural effects within industrial branches. We were able to correct for structural changes between the 15 branches, but within some branches, and especially in the chemical industry, there can be some structural changes, mainly because we have two main types of products, pharmaceutical products, with a very high growth, even during the period. There was a 28% growth in the activity of pharmaceutical products over the period 2021-23, but a deep recession for basic chemicals. And most of the consumption of energy is going to basic chemical. Pharmaceutical products consume very little energy. So just this differential of growth between these two two types of product within the chemical industry has, of course, an impact in our measurement of energy efficiency improvement. Fortunately, Eurostat has launched a survey to get more detailed data about the energy consumption by type of product, going further in disaggregation compared to the 15 branch. And for the moment, data are available for a limited number of countries. We're able to access data from some country, particularly the Netherlands. And we have been able to estimate that for the EU as a whole, around 20% of the savings that we have been measuring with our ODYSSEE indicators indeed does not correspond to true energy saving, but to product effect mostly in the chemical industry. And this is something, as mentioned Zineb, we will try to improve the calculation of ODEX, making use of these new types of data to better disaggregate chemical industry between these two types of activities with very different level of energy intensity. I hope this answered your question. For the EU, we're able to do it. We can do it for the countries that provided the data to Eurostat. So it's 5 countries, but among the largest countries in the EU. Now, let's look at another question, is the electrification in industry. Of course, all the countries would like to increase the level of electricity used to make a profit of the availability of electricity from renewables, decrease the carbon intensity of the economy. And what is the situation? No, there was one slide missing. There was another slide before.
Okay.
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 Sorry, there is one slide that has been hidden. In terms of electricity use, there are 5 branches that consume almost half of the electricity use in the EU industry. Yeah.
1 second, just I'm going to show a slide that was hidden.
Sorry for the. So what we see with electrification in industry, what you will see in the slide that we are looking for, is that at the EU level, the electrification was almost marginal since 2010. In other words, the share of electricity in the energy consumption of industry has only increased by 0.5 points to 33% in 2024. And there are important differences among the countries in this electrification rate. I don't give the full dispersion, but for the largest EU country, it is important to mention that Italy has a much higher share than the EU average, with 40% of the consumption in industry that is coming from electricity, but it is only 24% in the Netherlands. And the main important message here is that the electrification level, this is to say the share of electricity in the consumption, is decreasing and not increasing as we would expect. It's decreasing in half of EU countries. In 6 countries, it is a decreasing trend since 2010, and the largest decrease is in Sweden, minus 8 points. And in 8 countries, there is a decreasing trend since 2019, which reversed the trend seen before from 2010 to 2019, when the electrification rate was increasing. And these most important countries which impact the EU average are Poland and Italy, where we see this reversing trend. Then, okay, I already presented that. And we can also do a decomposition in the same way we did it for the total consumption. We can do it by type of energy. We have done it also for gas, for other purposes, and for electricity. We can explain why the electricity consumption has decreased so much between 2019 and 2023, a decrease of 115 terawatt-hour, which represents 12% of the electricity consumption of industry in 2019. And it is explained by the same factors as we have seen before: energy savings, which has the biggest impact; structural changes, which are not the same exactly because it depends on the branch that consumes the most electricity. And on this period, the effect of electrification was marginal and even negative, as I mentioned, in the sense that the electrification reduced a little bit between 2019 and 2023 because of the high price of electricity. Now, on the left part of the graph, you see the decomposition of the electricity consumption between 2010 and 2019. The electricity consumption in 2019 in industry was the same as in 2010. Why? Because the effect of the increased activity, which is shown by the orange bar, which was quite important, was offset by energy saving and also structural changes between the 15 branch, mostly linked to the higher growth of equipment manufacturing, which consume much less electricity per unit of activity than the other branches. And also in this period, there was an effect of the electrification, which contributed to increase the consumption by 32 terawatt-hour. Let's now look at the emission, CO2 emission of the industry sector. The CO2 emission, and now we have developed a new tools in the ODYSSEE-MURE environment, where we are able to decompose the CO2 emission by sector for the total of the economy. And from 2010 to 2023, here I look at the full period, the CO2 emission of industry decreased by 105 million tons CO2, that is to say by 23%, because of three main factors. Again, energy savings that have been converted in terms of ton of CO2, to decarbonization, and decarbonization reflects the reduction in the average emission factor of the industry sector, the average ratio ton of CO2 per TUE, and structural effect that more than offsets the effect of higher activity, because there has been a progression in the industrial activity over the whole period. Then let's go further into the decarbonization effect. This decarbonization may be misleading because it corresponds to reduction of the average emission factor at the level of industry. So it can be explained by substitution between fossil fuels. If industry uses more gas than coal, it will reduce the emission because gas lead to less emission than coal. But if there is a substitution from fossil fuel to fuels that are CO2 free at the level of industry sector, according to the way CO2 inventory are calculated, that is to say electricity, biomass, or heat, this will also be included in decarbonization. But it may be not a real decarbonization because these fuel, what I call the CO2-free fuel, are not entirely emission-free. If there is a switch to electricity or heat, as they emit CO2 at the level of power and heat plants, there is just a transfer of emission from one sector to another. And the magnitude of this indirect emission depends on the power or heat mix. And of course, as there is an increasing share of renewables, these indirect emissions are not increasing as much as if there was not this shift in the power and heat mix. And this varies significantly across countries. In the case of the EU average, 2/3 of the decarbonization at the sector level was linked to substitution to CO2-free fuels, and 1/3 to substitution within fossil fuels. So the question is, how about these 2/3? Did it lead to emission or not? At the EU level, these indirect emissions were marginal because as most of the shift to CO2-free fuels involve biomass. The question is whether biomass is CO2-free. It depends on the way it is counted in the inventory, but it is not included for the moment. The reason is that electrification remained marginal over the period, as we explained, and the share of heat declined by 1 point over the period. But this conclusion, of course, will be different from one country to the other and has to be looked at carefully. So as the conclusions, and the first one is that energy consumption had a very deep decrease from 2021 to 2023. That was the reason why we focused on this period. And in 2024, there was a slight rebound by 2-3% of the consumption. Chemical is the largest consuming branch and the most affected during this period of crisis, 2021-2023, and contributed to about 30% of the energy consumption reduction. Energy efficiency of industry accelerated at EU level, but this has to be considered carefully. This is the way we measure it, given the official data available. We believe that this will not continue at the same rate. And according to our estimate for 2025, we are back to the trend we had before the COVID period. That is to say, over the period 2010-2023. Part of this acceleration is due to some product effect that we will try to clean now in the future, and mainly in the chemical sector. Based on what we have shown you, energy savings explain 2/3 of the sharp reduction of energy consumption in industry, and 1/3 is linked to structural effects. If we try to include the product effect within some branch, this will change a little bit the balance, maybe 60-40%. The electrification of industry is slow at EU level and is not in line with the expectation of a policymaker, and it is even decreasing in half of EU countries recently. And the reduction of CO2 emission of industry is mainly explained by energy saving, decarbonization, and structural effects. Decarbonization that we measured in this decomposition analysis is apparent, as it may imply additional emission for the power and heat generation, but this was not the case for the EU as a whole, and will depend on the countries. So we thank you for your attention, and we are ready to answer additional questions.
Thanks a lot, Bruno and Zineb. We have indeed some questions, a good list of questions. So I encourage also all participants to upvote for the questions you think are the most important, the most relevant, because I'm not sure we will be able to handle all of the questions. So let's start directly. The first one is actually in two parts. I grouped two questions from Enrico Clementi that are related to analyzing how energy efficiency improvements could be related to the level of energy efficiency investments. So the question is, are you also able to explain energy efficiency improvement with the level of energy efficiency investment, and more specifically, are there specific energy efficiency investment data available at both EU and member state level? And it comes with a complementary question linked to the first one. How do you assess the energy efficiency improvements linked to investment in energy savings equipment and technologies?
This is what we would like to assess, but we have no data to do it. So what we can try to do is to correct from hidden effect, like this product effect we mentioned. Price effect, we can try to measure the price effect on the better management of industrial factories. So the effect of energy saving equipment and technology can only be deduced by difference once we have cleaned from all the other factors. Or it can be measured through bottom-up assessment, which is also what we are doing in the project with the MURE database. So we do monitor also the effect of investment linked to policy measures.
But for the moment, you confirm that there is no data source that would provide robust enough data about energy efficiency investment, right? Okay. So I think it's a clear answer. Second question from Benjamin Zimmer. In terms of priority for decarbonization total share of emissions, did you compare energy consumption data with emissions of the sector? Would it show the same? And would it show the same ranking for the sectors for emission share as it did for energy consumption? I think you partly answered that with the new CO2 decomposition tool, but maybe you want to you can elaborate a bit more on this, maybe per sector.
We could show the contribution of the different sectors, but okay, we didn't do it. We can't present everything.
Okay, so maybe
seen another question that is linked also to decarbonization is the effect of renewables. This is not shown here because we look at the emission at the level of industry, and renewable will have an impact on the power sector. So we need to have a look at the full picture of the composition of CO2 emission. On our website, you can see the decomposition for the power sector, which will be made available this week, I think, yes. Maybe today. This is something new we are adding. And the contribution of all sectors also in the decomposition of CO2 emission.
And the link to the two decomposition tools have been shared in the chat already. And I think there will also be later on a policy brief, right, from this analysis.
Okay.
So if you want to be informed, subscribe to the newsletter, and you will know when it's published. Next question from Joost Gerdes at TNO in the Netherlands. The chemical industry as a production index as a measure of activity, could the efficiency improvement be the result of a shift to a more expensive products which need less energy, so high value chemicals? I think that's connected to the structural changes questions we had earlier.
Yeah.
And I thank Joost Gerdes for providing data for the Netherlands, and we would be able to do a very good analysis for the Netherlands of structural effect within the chemical industry.
And maybe I can switch directly.
Sorry, the EU and not specific countries.
Okay.
Sorry.
If I find it back, because there was another question. Yes, here related a bit for a follow-up of the previous question we had already on intra-branch structural changes. It comes this time from Eberhard Rochem. Did you include intra-branch structural changes, meaning different developments of productions of basic products? Because his comment on that is that the structural effect that you mentioned in the presentation is among the 15 branches, but not within the branches. But I think later on in the presentation, that's something that you explained. But if you want to comment on that, that's also welcome.
So I saw a question asking whether we have CO2 decomposition for the period 2019-2023. With the tool, you can choose the period you want. Everything, all years are available. All the period can be built and adapted to the country.
And as for the question you just asked, Jean-Sébastien, yes, it has been answered by Bruno. We so far haven't taken into consideration structural changes within the branches, just between branches. So this is the methodological developments that are currently being carried out, but we won't be able to do that for all branches.
Chemical is the most, the branch where it is the most important because of the...
It wouldn't be impactful or significant for all branches, and we don't even have enough data for all branches, even if we wanted to perform such an analysis.
And I will stay with the questions that are more about the methodological approach. So a question from Liam McLaughlin. Please comment on the disadvantage that specific energy consumption, as used as the basis for the energy efficiency index, can be more affected by changing levels of activities than by the actual change in energy efficiency.
That's why we perform the decomposition analysis, which helps to disentangle the different effects. And as you can see, we are able to show the impact of the change in activity, which is what you are referring to. and the change in actual savings. I mean, the impact of actual energy efficiency savings.
Okay, and in case the answers are not completely covering your questions, you can also follow up in the Q&A panel. There are then questions, well, maybe one question about benchmarking before we go to the questions linking trends and measures. So about benchmarking, there is a question from Antoine Baudouin. How do you explain that the Nordic countries, and notably Finland and Sweden, seem to perform quite bad in the graphs that you've shown?
Let's go back to our first. We can just like, are you referring to energy efficiency progress?
That's not noted, but I guess that's the slide. Yeah, maybe this one, I would say, probably, huh? Because you see Finland and Sweden are on the very left with the smallest improvements.
At this stage, I don't think we can answer with a very solid data. We can't answer the question, honestly.
They are highly dependent on the pulp and paper industry, for which we show there were little energy efficiency improvements. But it's up to experts of the pulp and paper industry to say what are the reasons behind that. We are just observing. We have to deal with 27, 28 countries. 27. And even to explain the EU, this is a general comment, it's very difficult because sometimes it's just the differential of growth between different groups of countries, and it's very difficult to explain what we observe at EU average level.
I think that's a fair answer. That the indicators provide you a first level of analysis, and then you need to deep dive if you want to understand all the possible reasons for the changes or what is slower, what is faster.
In specific countries, we publish also country analysis of a country profile, and they are being updated now, will be published in January, February. And if you are interested also in more in-depth analysis of the industry sector, we have what we call a sectoral profile that is available also, that go in more detail, and in particular show interesting graph of benchmarking of performance.
Yes, and this one is already online.
And this is updated.
Yeah, updated for up to 2023. And you can find it on the same platform that we've shared with you.
And you can also subscribe to the newsletter to be I'm sorry to repeat that, but that's the best way to be informed when new contents are published. Coming back to the question about electricity, there is one from Alan Pierce. Within electricity, was there a shift between renewables and thermal generation? Is it something that can be monitored through the data you have analyzed?
Yeah. But what exactly is the question?
Within electricity, was there a shift between renewables and thermal generation?
Renewable? No, this is not at the level. You mean within industry?
No, within electricity, for electricity generation.
As I said, we did not cover that. This is not included.
Okay. Yeah, sorry.
But you can see it on the decomposition of CO2 tool.
Yeah, that's indeed a factor there. So now there are two questions related to the link between trends and measures. So the first one from, so maybe here we will refer to MURE, and I'm not sure how much we can answer that this morning. What are the specific energy efficiency measures that enabled the greatest improvements in the chemicals sector? Is that data available?
For chemical, we already answered that. You have to be careful. Part of the what we have shown and we call energy efficiency progress is in fact a product effect linked to the substitution between pharmaceutical product and basic chemical in the activity of chemicals. But there are still some energy efficiency measures
But we
that have an impact.
but we won't be able to
No.
point them today. Maybe you can refer to the MURE database for this specific question.
Yeah, I think that's maybe something that can be confusing when we use the word measures. So it depends whether the question is about technologies, and that's something that can be partly identified through the indicators, and as you said, also the intra-branch structural changes, etc. And the policy measures, where here indeed we will refer more to the MURE database, and there will be also next year other presentation on energy efficiency in industry, focused on countries where you will have more details about the policies in place and their impacts. So that makes also a nice link with the program for next year. Now I'm pleased to read you a question from Didier Bosbeuf. Well, the name is only Didier, but I would assume it's Didier Bosbeuf, the previous coordinator of ODYSSEE-MURE that I think most of the participants know. What are the barriers against electrification in industry, despite the fact that they lead to savings? And he comments that energy prices have also grown for gas. And as a complement, he's also asking what policies can be proposed to accelerate the electrification in industry, because that's one of the main results of your presentation today, that unfortunately the trends in electrification that do not go in the right direction from what you've shown.
Well, I can maybe give part of the answer. Not all branches can be electrified in industry. Some processes need other types of fuels. In some cases, even if the process can be electrified, this will involve investment that in industries are just not willing to make. So this is partly this is part of the answer, and I think it answers also part of the second question. Some measures that target processes that can be electrified and that are not being electrified for lack of investment can target supporting such investments, for example. Do you have other?
Well, the trend we see for the electrification can be linked to the fact that, especially I'm thinking of Sweden, where there have been a big decrease in the share of electricity. It can just be to the fact that the branch that use the most electricity had a low growth compared to branch that use less electricity. And this is a kind of structural effect also. But to answer Didier, I think the biggest barrier at the level of a country is the price of electricity during that period.
Like I think he said, regardless of the price.
Yeah.
Indeed.
So,
no, but that's also relevant in the answer to mention the differences in prices and in taxes as well. I think it affects. Okay, we are a bit behind, but if you can stay a few more minutes, we can try to cover the last questions. There is again a questions related to the effect of COVID. Do you think that these trends happen because of COVID also? If so, how can we try to forecast for the next years, taking into account that some data was impacted by the COVID reality?
Well, COVID as a whole is also a sum of effects. So COVID also led maybe to a surge in energy prices, which is covered by the what we showed about the link with between the drop in consumption and the increase in energy prices. There's also the activity part which slowed down, and as we showed there is some link, but there is a decoupling also at some point. It would be complicated to look beyond these two components of the impact of COVID, unless there's a specific dimension that you.
I think the impact of COVID now is marginal. I think the main factors are linked to prices and to the Ukraine crisis. more than COVID.
And I think we can see that also in the first slide with the recovery after COVID.
Jean-Sébastien, I could not hear. Could you repeat what you said?
No, I just say that I confirmed what Bruno said, that in one of the first slides we saw that the recovery was quite quick after COVID, and that then there was the next change in the trend was related to the changes in the prices. Clearly. There is one comment that's not a question, that's a comment from Jan Neil about the CO2 decomposition tool that maybe we need to investigate, because he said that on his side it does not work and he's using Microsoft Edge. I would say on my side I also use Edge and it's working, so maybe Jan, you can contact us and maybe we can check that. But let's say generally on our side and from the number of visits we have on that page, it seems to work for most of the visitors. Bruno already answered that the period 2019-23 can be found because you can select the years. And maybe the last question is from Astarios Tiegas. Is the increase of renewable production in electricity encountered in the decarbonization numbers?
No. No, Bruno has already.
Yeah, I think that's related to a question we previously answered.
That's the last part of the presentation.
Okay. Perfect. In the meantime, I don't know if Wolfgang is here. I made you speaker as well, Wolfgang, if you want to say a last word before we. So Wolfgang Eichhammer, who is the new coordinator of the project, if you want to say a few words before we close this webinar and the webinar series for 2025, before we wish you happy holidays.
Yes, I think Jean-Sébastien already gave an overview over the webinars. Did you?
Yes.
To come? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Then I can keep it very short, knowing that you are very efficient. On one hand, it's really a pleasure to have you here in this webinar series, notably on industry. The topic of industry is a very interesting one at present. At the European Union level, but it's not the only one, and this is why we focus in further work also on other sectors. With that, I thank you very cordially for being present here so shortly before Christmas, and I wish you also great holidays. Hopefully not too many proposals to write if you are on that, or too many projects to work on, so that you would have time with your families, with yourself. And I wish you a good start in the next year, and hopefully also having you on board for our further webinar activities. Thanks a lot and have a good time. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Wolfgang, and a big thanks to Zineb and Bruno for the very insightful presentations. And as we said, that will be followed by a policy brief next year, so stay tuned. Thanks, everyone.
And thank you, Jean-Sébastien, for the.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
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 Bye.